Congressman Chris Smith, I want to move on because tomorrow, two big markups on bills that you have are on the House, in the House committee tomorrow. One related to UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Work Agency. This is one that's another corrupt United Nations organizations. In fact, talked about this last week. Israeli intelligence has revealed that at least 13 of UNRWA's employees from the relief agency in Gaza were involved with the October 7th attacks on Israel by Hamas.
And Tony, that's only an ugly tip of the anti-Semitic iceberg that is UNRWA. They teach children each and every day to hate Jewish men and women and children, that the only good Jew is a dead Jew, and it's right there in their teaching materials. They hate America too, but they hate Israel even more, and that there be no more Israel. So every day, UNRWA schools, which we pay for, and we are the major donor by far, are doing this nefarious teaching of anti-Semitism, suicide bombers. They have pep rallies where they laud suicide bombers, and you wonder why a kid, by the time he's 13, has an AK-47 in his hand to kill Jewish people, because he's been taught.
And when they do that, they carry these out, their families receive payments. Exactly.
If they get captured by the Israelis doing it under pay to slay policy of the PLA, I should say, and Hamas, they pay them and reserve a position when they do get out of prison.
They got a job.
They got a job. I mean, it's disgusting.
In 2013, I took some members of Congress over, and we went to the first time into the eastern part of Israel, West Bank, first congressional group to go over there. We were briefed by the Palestinian Watch about this very thing, and this was 2013, and I was thinking after October the 7th, I would not be surprised if some of those terrorists had crossed over into Israel and slaughtered innocent civilians if they had not been recipients of that indoctrination that came from UNRWA.
There's no doubt about it. It is rife. UN Watch, Hillel Nur testified at 3 hearings that I've had this year alone. The last one was just last week, and it was a co-hearing with Brian Mast. It was a great hearing, and they pointed out they have documentation that every day these kids
it's on TV. It's on TV as well. I mean, they have their version of Sesame Street, essentially, which is teaching them to hate Jews, less than human, and we're funding it. Now, Donald Trump
bill. Donald Trump,
he cut it off
completely.
But Joe Biden actually started it back up and paid back what Donald Trump
again, it's outrageous use of U.S. taxpayer funding.
What's your bill do?
My bill would totally defund UNRWA. It says they cannot get so much as a dime of U.S. taxpayer funding. It does point out that nothing in it precludes providing humanitarian assistance, food, clothing, and shelter.
Do we not have our own aid relief agency?
Of course, USAID.
Why can't we do it? Why do we have to give money to a corrupt organization?
You're absolutely right. They're corrupt. They steal. They use the money for bad things like tunnels, but they also, most importantly, train children, poison the minds of little children, little Palestinian kids to hate Jews.
How do people help with your bill?
Well, support it. I'm not sure how much support I'll get on the other side of the aisle tomorrow. The Republicans are solidly behind me. Some of the Democrats are. When it comes to the floor, we're going to need good votes there. So it's a very serious attempt.
So you're in the markup in committee.
It's tomorrow.
What's the bill number?
Oh, I don't have the bill number. I'm sorry.
Right, we'll get that posted on the website. But this is one step in committee.
I just introduced it last week after our hearing.
Any idea when you might get it to the floor?
ASAP, and frankly, the speaker is very much aligned. Speaker Johnson, he agrees 1,000% that we've got to find some other venue other than UNRWA, a totally corrupt and anti-Semitic organization, to give our money to. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, $7 billion years to date, U.S. taxpayer funding to this horrible organization. Now, we care about humanitarian assistance, but who you give it to matters.
Right. This doesn't make sense if you ask me, Congressman Smith, that we would be funding UNRWA that is tied to Hamas, that is funding terrorism, and then we're funding Israel. I mean, it's like we're funding both sides.
It's crazy. In 2003, I offered an amendment, passed in the House of Representatives on finding another alternative to UNRWA, because 20 years ago, we knew it even before that,
Right.
how bad this organization was. And everybody goes, they're improving, they're reforming. Nonsense. They're not improving. They're getting worse. And they want Israel annihilated. And that's why they're still refugees. They want to go and totally occupy Jerusalem, go in all the areas that current day are Israel.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, even I mentioned this last week, George W. Bush had concerns about
Right.
the leadership of UNRWA back in 2005.
Well, again, in 2003, with my bill, my amendment, it died in the Senate. I could not get it out of the Senate. And I just find that, we've had opportunity after opportunity. Hopefully tomorrow's bill will be the one that works.
All right, so tomorrow is a committee markup.
Yes.
Then it will move to the floor. But, folks, I'm going to go ahead and give you the Capitol switchboard number. It's 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. And you can contact your members of Congress, both your congressman and your two senators, and just tell them to defund this corrupt United Nations organization that is funding Hamas.
It's called the UN Relief Works Administration, UNRWA, and it's been around since the 1940s.
Yeah.
75 years or so.
Since 1949, and they've not yet resettled one
That's right.
refugee.
Because they
They've not
want to resettle them in Israel with Israel gone.
That's right.
That's the game plan.
That's right.
That's the game plan.
And this clamoring for a two-state solution.
I know.
I've talked about that
Gaza has
last week.
proved what that is.
That's
De
my
facto,
point.
Two-state
My
solution,
point.
and what do?
They've had jurisdictional control since 2007.
That's right.
And what have they done? They have been working to attack Israel. I mean, I was there in, I think, 2014 when there were rocket attacks, about 5,000 rockets fired into Israel during that time. This is the outcome of a two-state solution. That's why Israel says it won't work.
I know. You're right. I agree with them.
All right, we're going to run out of time, and I want to go to another important markup, another bill that you have tomorrow on Capitol Hill. That deals with an issue that you and I both care deeply about, and that is Nigeria.
Yeah.
Nigeria is a powder keg. It's the most populous nation in Africa, on the continent. And it is, I'm afraid we're going to see another Rwanda.
Well, I think you're right. There's the governments, and multiple governments, including the current one, have not stepped up to protect Christians and moderate Jews, moderate Muslims, I should say, but Christians in particular. The estimates are 52,250 Christians have been slaughtered since 2009. 5,014 last year alone, according to Open Doors.
Just over Christmas, over 200.
That's right. Some even put the number at as many as 300 were killed. And what does Secretary of State Blinken do when he goes over there? He was just over there a few days ago. He offers his condolences.
Yeah.
Well, they need to be designated a CPC.
Right.
And you, as chairman of the commission,
when I was
knows
chairman,
as well.
we were successful in getting the Trump administration, working with Secretary Pompeo, to designate Nigeria as a CPC. Now, for our viewers and listeners, why that is important, because that affects our ability to put sanctions on those countries, trade, financial transactions. So it's also, there's a stigma attached to that in the international community. So it has an effect. But as soon as the Biden administration came in, and I was my last year as a member of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, they took that designation away.
And Secretary Blinken made a trip to Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, and to everyone's shock, told the president, you're no longer a country of particular concern, so the threat of real sanctions against your country are lifted.
Right.
And there was the Christians there were bewildered and very upset.
And I met with Secretary Blinken in my capacity at USCIRF, and I met with the at that time acting ambassador. And you know what I got, Chris, back? What we got back is that, well, this is not a religious conflict.
I know.
This is a climate change conflict. It's because of the scarcity of resources. You have these herders and farmers that are warring, and religion is only ancillary to the situation.
Great point. The Fulani are now killing Christians in huge numbers. Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa do the same. I remember when I was trying to get Boko Haram designated as a foreign terrorist organization. I had multiple hearings.
I remember.
On the day I was marking up my bill to compel it, they put him on the FTL list, but it was 3 years too late. It was bewildering to me as to why the administration wouldn't recognize Boko Haram, a horrible terrorist organization as just that. And do things that might mitigate some of the damage and some of the harm that they're causing to people. They just look the other way. And they gave no good answers. Johnny Carson, who was the Assistant Secretary for Africa Affairs, that was his name, not the Johnny Carson, but another one.
Not the one associated
but
with
he told me
man.
in my hearing, the reason why they didn't want to put FTO status was because this is really an attempt by these people, Boko Haram, to embarrass the president. Blowing up bridges, abducting little girls
Right.
from school. Later we had the Chibok girls abducted and so many others. It's all about a caliphate and the attempt to try to force a Muslim belief on people.
Could this be, and I've seen this elsewhere, the hesitancy is because primarily the target here are Christians?
I think it's a great question. I don't know their hearts and souls as to why, but there has been such a reluctance to recognize what is approaching a genocide. They're being killed simply because they are Christians, and the Genocide Convention is trying to destroy a group, whole or in part, while they're trying to do it.
There should be an understanding of what a significant humanitarian crisis this could create, because if these Nigerian Christians were to flee their country, and go to Europe or somewhere, this is a mass movement of refugees and would be a huge crisis.
And what are they asking? They're asking their government to respond quickly to mitigate the harm, the damage, to do surveillance, and they're sitting there with their hands folded.
They're doing very much what we see right now and what we saw in India, which is why we asked for a CPC designation on India.
Exactly.
Is because it's not necessarily at the hands of government, but government is turning a blind eye to this.
Gross indifference.
Right. Chris Smith, unfortunately, we're out of time, but always great to talk with you. Thank you so much for the tremendous work you do on Capitol Hill, advocating
you're
for.
fantastic.
Well, you're up there leading the
and
charge
you're a
for the sanctity of human life, and you don't stop there. You're advocating for the persecuted all around the globe, and we're grateful for it.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it.